Verbs in the passive voice allow the action to happen to the subject instead of having the subject do the verb. So in the sentence, the boy has been taught by the teacher, the subject, the boy, is receiving the teaching. Often, but not always, our sentence will have an agent, here, by the teacher. The passive voice for perfect system tenses, that is, the perfect, pluperfect, and future perfect, are very similar in their formation. This video will cover the passive voice for the perfect tense. Before we start, we have to talk about principal parts for verbs. Normal transitive verbs, that is, verbs that typically take a direct object, like to teach, dokeo, have 4 principal parts. Here they are: dokeo, doker, dokui, doctus. Sometimes the 4th principal part will be doctum, where the ending is a um instead of a us. It all depends on the style of teaching and the text you're learning from. I will use the us ending for the 4th part for this video. The first part, dokeo, is the first person singular of the present tense, so I teach. The second part, dokeru, is the present active infinitive, to teach. The third, dokui, is the first person singular of the perfect tense, so I taught or I have taught. And the fourth one, doctus, is the perfect passive participle, having been taught. Or if you're using the form, it's the accusative supine, but no matter about that one. The neat thing about principal parts is that the first 2 parts, dokeo and dokeru, are used with present system tenses. So we use these 2 forms to form all of the stuff in the present, imperfect, and future. The last 2 are key for perfect system tenses, that is, the perfect, pluperfect, and future perfect. The third principal part, dokui, is used for all perfect active forms, while the 4th one, doctus, is used for all perfect passive forms. That's it. A simple division in a word's parts, and you can, in fact you probably should, think of the 3rd part as the perfect active part and the 4th part as the perfect passive. So we're going to investigate how to form the passive voice of the perfect tense. The first thing that we do is take the 4th part, so doctus, and turn it into an adjective. Here we go, doctus a. We're going to use doctus when the subject is masculine, docta when feminine, and doctum when neuter. So this will be the singular form. And in the plural, we need to use the plural forms of doctus a. Since it's a first and second declension adjective, we will turn doctus into docti, docta into docti, and doctum into docta, here represented as docti a. So we have the singular and plural. Now we need to differentiate between first, second, and third person. The simplest way to do this is to take our handy linking verb sum and use that. So sum es est, sumus estis sunt. And here is our passive perfect verb. Doctus aum sum, doctus aum es, doctus aum est. And in the plural, docti a sumus. Notice that the participle part changes. Docti a estis and docti a sunt. That's it. And we do these exact same steps for every single verb. The 4th principal part, the perfect passive participle, make it into an adjective, then add the present tense of sum. So for amo, amarra, amavi, amatus, we have amatus aum sum, etc. The same goes for capio, caper, capi, captus. It's captus aum sum. The translation can be a bit complicated, though. Remember that the perfect active tense can be translated as either I taught or I have taught. The first translation, I taught, is the simple past, something that happened in the past at a moment, while the second translation, I have taught, is a completed present, meaning that it's an action that by present time is done and over with, but it still has some bearing on the now. So I have taught for 10 years. My teaching over the 10 years is completed, but it still relates to now, since I am still teaching. So our passive translation of the perfect tense can take 2 different forms. Doctus sum can be either I was taught, this is the past simple form, or I have been taught. This is the present completed. Really, you're going to want to use the context of your sentence to tell you which one it is. So if we're reading something in Latin about the life of, Thomas Jefferson, you come across the phrase, is Latinam doctus est. you'll very likely translate it as he was taught Latin, because he's in the past. But if you're reading about one of my own current students, you'll likely translate it as he has been taught Latin. Context determines everything. There's two more points about the perfect passive. This he has been taught translation of doctus est is the original form and meaning of the perfect passive. Perfectus in Latin means completed, and the three perfect tenses in Latin show the completed aspect of three time periods. So the perfect is originally the completed present, the pluperfect the completed past, and the future perfect the completed future. Thinking of it this way, the perfect passive is the perfect participle, that's doctus, plus sum in the proper time period. So since the perfect tense is the completed present, we use the present tense of sum. This is fantastic, I think. It's not just a coincidence, it's because of Latin's highly structured nature that allows us to analyze and understand it on a different level. The pluperfect, by the way, has the perfect participle plus the past of sum, and the future perfect is the same, just with the future of sum. Fantastic. And my last point is this. With passive verbs in the perfect system, we automatically know the gender of the subject. So here, let me illustrate. The active perfect verb docuit is translated he, she, it taught. And we would use the exact same word, docuit, for every subject, male, female, or neuter. But in the passive, we specify the subject's gender. He has been taught is doctus est. But if you wanted to say she has been taught, it would be docta est. That makes sense. But we do the same for all forms of the verb. So I'm a guy, would say doctus sum, I have been taught. But my wife would say docta sum, which would still be translated in English as I have been taught, but said by a feminine subject. Now see, by understanding the inherent nature of the perfect passive in Latin, and not just how it's translated into English, we know more about our verb than just what our meager English translation can give us. And this is where English fails us. It's not as specific as Latin is at some places, and unfortunately we lose that information when we translate. You could say that our English translation is like a black hole. Information goes in, like the gender of the subject, that can never come out again when we translate. It's one of the big reasons why reading Latin, and other languages of course, in the original is so important.